All right, so I want to start the class. We've now had 2 weeks of discussion so far. And as your brains have been thinking about all the things, are there any questions that have come up throughout the week that you wanted to ask?
Can you start over?
Both lesson 1 and 2 are online on YouTube, so if you want to watch them, you can go ahead and do that.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm messing with you.
yeah. So, all right, so tonight what we're going to do is we're going to kind of finish up some stuff from lesson 2 that I didn't cover. We kind of made our rounds with it. And we are going to be in, I'm going to start here actually, Isaiah 65, 17 through 25, and Isaiah 66. Okay, and so one of the things we got to remember about like prophetic books like Isaiah is that, does anyone know what a dual fulfillment or multiple fulfillment prophecy means?
More than one happened at one time?
Huh?
More than one happened at one time?
In a sense, yeah. Yeah.
It happened shortly after it prophesied and then again a long time after.
Yeah, so many of them are dual, some are multiple in the sense of, like when they're talking about returning from captivity, Babylon, like if you go before the Babylonian captivity, they're going to talk like the kingdom that's coming after is the messianic, fulfilled kingdom. In which you realize when they come back, what do they not get? They don't get it. And you realize this was better, but there's something even greater to come out. Right? A good example is Isaiah 7:14. The virgin birth, a lot of times we talk about. Isaiah 7:14, a lot of people go, oh, look, that's only talking about Jesus. That's a singular prophecy, right? A singular line prophecy. When actually it was talking about a person who would be born during that time, right? And then Jesus that's what fulfillment means. He fills it to the fullest, okay? So there may be times also when God will explain something, especially in Isaiah, about what this new kingdom, this messianic kingdom is going to be like. And what you realize, we're in the messianic kingdom, but we don't live in the world in which he describes. And there's still a world to come. Okay? And that's the promises in heaven. And Revelation actually at the very end picks up on a lot of that. All right, so we're in one of those areas tonight, and we'll explain that as we go. But let's go to Isaiah 65 for a moment. And this is, does anyone know when Isaiah was prophesying? Anyone know about the time frame? Huh? 683? Yeah, it's about 150 years before, 100 to 150 years before the captivity. Okay, so before Babylonian captivity. So he's prophesying about the captivity that is to come, right? And a lot of what his discussion is, what's going to happen, the sins that are going to lead up to it, things they can do to actually prevent it, the things they won't do to prevent it, right? What's going to happen when they're in captivity, and then also the return, okay? So these last couple chapters is after God has relented, they're being sent back, right? And they are going to enter into the New Jerusalem, this New Jerusalem that is promised, right? That's going to be great. It's going to cover all of the nations of the world. Well, they don't get that, right? Okay, so let's get there. Isaiah 65:17. Somebody read 17 and read all the way to 25.
For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered or come into mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in that which I created. For behold, I created Jerusalem to be a joy, and the people to be a gladness. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people. No more shall be heard in it the sound of weeping and the cries of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant who lives but only a few days, or an old man who does not fill out his days. For the young man shall die 100 years old, and the sinner 100 years old shall be accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be, and my children shall long enjoy the work of their They shall not labor in vain or bear children for calamity, but they shall be the offspring of the blessed of the Lord, and their descendants with them. Before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together, and the lion shall eat straw like an ox, and dust shall be the serpent's food. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain.
Okay, so one of the things that you're gathering, right, is that Jerusalem is going to be this place of just prosperity, right? It's going to be this place of there's going to be no more evil, right? No more pain in this place. The wicked will be sent out, right? And, everybody will have, all of their means taken care of. Nobody will lack for anything, right? And God says, I will be their God. They will be my people. Okay, so you're starting to see this. But in history, you don't see this really kind of develop, right, in Jerusalem, at least immediately. So let's jump over real quick before I get ahead of myself. Someone else read Isaiah 66, and I know it's going to be a little bit of a tough reading at times, okay, so whoever's confident in their reading. Isaiah 66, 15 all the way to 24, all right? Isaiah 60, now I just scared everybody off, didn't I?
For behold, the Lord will come in fire, and his chariots like the whirlwind, to render his anger in fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire will the Lord enter into judgment, and by his sword with all flesh. And those slain by the Lord shall be many. Those who sanctify and purify themselves to go into the gardens, following one in the midst, eating pig's flesh, and the abomination and mice, shall come to an end together, declares the Lord. For I know their works and their thoughts, and the time is coming to gather all nations and tongues. And they shall come and see my glory, and I will set a sign among them. And from them I will send survivors to the nations, to Tarshish, Pool, and Lud, who draw the bow, to Tubal and Javan, to the coastlands far away, that have not heard my fame or seen my glory. And they shall declare my glory among the nations. What verse did you say that?
All the way to the end of the chapter.
And they shall bring all your brothers from all the nations as an offering to the Lord, on horses and chariots, and in litters, and on mules, and on dromedaries, to my holy mountain Jerusalem. Says the Lord, just as the Israelites bring their grain offering in a clean vessel to the house of the Lord. And some of them also I will take for priests and for Levites, says the Lord. For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your offspring and your name remain. From new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares the Lord. And they shall go out and look on the dead bodies of the men who have rebelled against me. For their worm shall not die, their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh.
Okay, so what are some characteristics that you're seeing of this new heaven and new earth that Isaiah has pointed out here in chapter 66? What are some things you noticed?
He's talking about the new heavens and the new earth that he makes.
Yep. What are some characteristics about this place, this environment?
No crying, no weeping, a place to live, food to eat
Okay, once again, for the righteous, right?
for the righteous. Yeah.
What else?
24 is talking about the fire that's not quenched,
Okay.
so people are still alive.
All right, so there's going to be this fire, right? And at the beginning, it says fire, it's going to, the anger of the Lord, right? The wrath of God, the judgment of God, but it will also sanctify those, right? Who have not basically soiled their garments. But this idea that all nations will come, right? And so this fire is an unquenchable. It will continue to burn and burn and burn and burn. And we will look on, right, our enemies, and their bodies will continually do what? Be burned up. All right? So let's just take all those images, okay? And let's go to Revelation 20 just for a moment, all right? And I'm going to read this, and I want you to be thinking about all the things that we just read and put it right here. There are only 5 different places where the term new heavens, new earth actually are together, right? The idea of new heavens, new earth. All right, so I want you to read, I'm going to read Revelation 20. I'm going to start in verse 11, okay? And I'm going to read down to verse 3 of 21. Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. From his presence earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown in the lake of fire. That is the second death. The lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written into the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. And so, John, in the book of Revelation, he is seeing images that are coming directly from these two chapters in Isaiah. Okay? He is seeing something. Now, does anyone have a guess of when John was written? Or the book of Revelation, I'm sorry. When the book of Revelation was written? Anyone have a guess, idea?
36 AD.
What?
36 AD.
That would have been the earliest written New Testament book if it was.
Okay.
So that's only 6 years after the time of
Yes.
Jesus. Oh, good guess, yeah. Good guess, thank you. 95 is one of the dates given. So there are a couple dates. You're either right before 80-70. People think it's talking about Jerusalem. Okay. Then there are people who are tweeners. Okay. In between the 80-70 and the 80-70 or 95. It's written in preparing people for Domitian to come. You either think Nero is the beast, or you think Domitian's the beast, or you're a person who thinks Revelation is speaking about only end times, right? So there's a couple different options. But no matter what, one of the things we're going to talk about, people try to use these to say, well, this is only talking about the time that Jesus would come and establish his kingdom, which once again, in multiple fulfillment prophecy and dual fulfillment prophecy, there is a sense in which, yes, that is true. But in the New Testament, one of the things we were looking at last week, and this is kind of the summary of last week, is though Jesus has made all things new, there's still a time when things have to become even newer, right? And even better. And what John is seeing is obviously we are in the day of judgment, right? Right? This is when the book of life is open, right? And the judge is being, everyone's being judged. People are being thrown in the lake of fire, right? Isn't that the day of judgment? Isn't that what we've all? And it's at this time John is seeing what come down? After the day of judgment. He's seeing the new heavens and new earth, but that holy city's coming down where? Out of heaven. And it says God is going to be among men, right? So, and this is a kind of concluding our last lesson, okay, where all things are being made new. This statement, new heaven, new earth, does not make sense if there is only a new heaven and not a new earth, unless this is the only statement who people who are opposing it, this is what they say. Well, new heavens, new earth just represents a new state of things. Okay? It just represents, it's a phrase that represents a new phase of life. And so that new phase of life can look like anything. But there's a lot of terms in the Bible that talk about dispensations, new dispensations coming in. Why would it specifically use the phrase new heaven and new earth? Okay? And so What I am trying to say, or what the new heaven, new earth view tries to say, is that there is a both new heaven, new earth. As we talked about, it's similar to the Garden of Eden, but it also has to be better. And that's what Jesus comes and brings. Jesus allows this relationship in the Garden of Eden where God and man, heaven and earth, were at one time one. Jesus can make that possible in a way that could not be made possible before Jesus came. Okay? So that's kind of where we're heading. And I want to finish lesson 2 with Romans 8 because we didn't really get there. We talked about 2 Peter. Like I said, if you missed last week, you're kind of hung, right, from a lot of things that we've been talking about, but I can't go back and repeat everything. But let's go to Romans 8 for a moment. And I read this week 1, but we just kind of read it. But now that we have more in our mind, right, last week, Jesus talked about how all things are going to be made new in the new creation, right? Acts 3:21 talks about how we're still waiting for everything on heaven and earth to be restored, right? And why does that phrase keep coming up? Everything on heaven and on earth. The restoring of all things on heaven and earth, if earth is just going to be utterly destroyed. Either the phrase is just representative of a new phase of life, right? That's really the only argument against that. Or there is something about heaven and something about earth that is going to be renewed and restored. And this goes back to the redemptive principle, right? We always talk about redemption with our relationship with God, but the Bible keeps talking about redeeming all things on heaven and earth. Redeeming all things on heaven and earth. And I've got several verses from lesson 2 on there, Ephesians 1, Colossians 1, Acts 3:21, right? Matthew 19:28. The new heaven, new earth position believes this is what we're trying to renew. Not that God tried it, it didn't work, so he's just going to go a whole completely different route. We're trying to get back to this state. It's got to be better, but still back to something like that. Okay? So let's look at Romans 8. Here is Paul writing about our future glory, okay, and our bodies being resurrected. All right? Which, unfortunately, the spiritual heaven view, one of the things that has always bothered me is the resurrection of the body. How can there be a resurrection of the body in a completely spiritual sense? Unless it's a spiritual body, obviously, but that's not really a resurrection of a body, right? That's not a redemptive body. That's not a redeemed body. That's a new body, okay? And we'll get into some of that. We're going to look at all the, probably next week, we're going to start getting into, okay, what do people say against this? Just to kind of give some mix, all right? So let's start in Romans 8. Somebody read 18 through 24, loud and proud.
For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to fertility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for the adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For what hopes are what he sees. But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience.
All right, right there, that's good.
Is that it?
Yep, that's good. Okay, so on first read, what do you think is going on? First read, you hear Romans chapter 8, and you read that. What's going on in your head when you read that? Okay, so creation will be set free. What in the world does that mean? What does creation to be set free mean?
It's set free from sin.
Okay. All right. So let's look. Let's erase some of this right here. And Rick, you're coming in at the end of lesson 2, going to be starting lesson 3 tonight, so you might be a little lost, but we'll catch you up. Creation. So it says it'll be set free from sin. Okay, so let's think about that for a moment. Why does creation, first, what is creation? What does he mean by creation? Okay, so there are some possibilities. Mankind. But what's the problem with mankind being creation in this context? Huh? Okay, yeah, there was stuff here before man came along, right? So there's still more of creation than just mankind. That doesn't encompass everything. But what's another problem with that? In context, creation's being set free and given what? Creation is going to be given a, right?
I mean, it says not only the creation, but we ourselves. So obviously it's talking about not just we as in our bodies, but creation.
Yeah, and creation is looking for the same hope that who is going to get at the end when we read? The sons of
God.
Okay. Or the sons of glory, right? So one of I listen to a guy, unfortunately, I do that too often, who is trying to explain this in a non-new heavens, new earth view. And creation is everybody who's a child of God. Because obviously creation's being set free from sin. And we know that, okay, let's say you choose mankind. It can't be evil of mankind, right? It can't be evil, the evil people of mankind, because they're not being set free. What did we read in Revelation 21 and Isaiah 66 and Isaiah 65? What's their hope? Eternal judgment, right? Lake of fire. They're not being set free from sin. They are going to be entering into the full consequences of sin, aren't they? So creation has to be something other than all of mankind, right? Or, well, someone else said, well, it's all the good people. Well, that doesn't really make sense because it's saying creation is looking for the same hope of the sons of glory. Well, who are the sons of glory? They are the good of mankind, aren't they? Right? So for creation to be the sons of God and then saying it's like the same hope that the sons of God are getting. That's redundant, isn't it? So there's something else about creation that is being restored and renewed and set free that's going to have the same hope. Now, I had one person actually give me, in discussion with him, okay, creation is the whole world. But the way it's going to be set free is through
New heaven and new earth.
destruction. Right? It's going to be destroyed, therefore set free. Before we even get into that, if I were to tell you, hey, I'm going to set you free by utterly destroying you, would that be freedom to you? Right?
Only if you was God.
Right.
Believe you if they-
Right? Now, death can be freedom if you have hope. Right? So it's any other comments before I...
Well, it makes me think of the state that the garden was in was supposed to be the perfect intended state of mankind to live in. And so when it's talking about being set free from its bondage and corruption, I mean, that's making me think of it returning to the state that God intended us to live in.
Yep. Okay. So that is the view that I hold, that creation is speaking. All right, we've been talking about new heavens, new earth. Okay. Romans 8, Paul is saying that even creation itself is going to go through a redemptive, transformative process, the same as the sons of glory, and it has the same hope that we have. If it is just destruction, that is not hope. Okay? That's the point of Romans. That's my point in bringing up Romans 8. And we're going to discuss that further as we're going to really pin Romans 8 with 1 Peter 3, and we're going to go through all that process. Not necessarily tonight, but we're finishing up. This is the essential view of the new heavens, new earth. God created Eden, okay, which was heaven and earth together, God space and man space together. Sin separated us, but there were still places where there were heaven and earth, and that's going to be our subject tonight, by the way. That's what we're going to get into tonight. Where heaven and earth still came together, Jesus restored it, right? God can now live inside of us, and yet creation still longs, right? So we got to look at creation still longs for the same hope that we have. And even though we have God in us, do we have our resurrected bodies yet? Right? So we're still waiting for the new body. That's essentially the overall, and some of you who are just coming in from missing the first two lessons, overall, that is the flow of the argument of the new heaven, new earth position. Okay? This is not a trial period where God said, now I got to erase it all and start somewhere new up in heaven, right? What he desired here is exactly what he desires here. And I'm going to finish off going back to Revelation 21. After judgment, look at what he says. We ended in verse 3. I'm going to reread verse 3 and read a couple more verses. It said, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man." What we're going to be looking at tonight, that is a constant theme. God is going to try to keep dwelling with man. Not to get man to just come to him, but that God would go and dwell with man. And that is the restoring of all things. "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And he who is seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making" what? "All things new." Well, one of the phrases that we keep coming across in Ephesians, Acts, Colossians, Philippians, 1 Peter, Revelation, is the all things new include all things on heaven and all things on earth. All right? Okay. So I want any questions on that before I put that lesson kind of away for a moment. All right, so go to lesson 3. All right? What we are going to do now, and this is probably going to take us 2 weeks, okay, at least, if not more. If you don't have the notes, they're over there. So we're going to look at this concept of heaven on earth, all right? What does that mean? And I want to start off by asking a question. What makes heaven heaven? What makes heaven heaven?
God's presence.
Ultimately, it's where God is, right? When we think of the eternal heaven home, we're thinking of where God is. Now, there's a sense in which, even for my spiritual realm class, Rick brought it up, heaven means the heavenlies, the spiritual bodies, the spiritual places, okay? All right? But essentially, what we're going to see tonight, it's where God is, because we want to be wherever God is. That's the ultimate hope that we all have, right? Wherever God is, that's where heaven will be, okay? It's kind of like the promised land. Remember in Exodus 33, Moses tells God, it's only the promised land if who's there? If God's there. What made the promised land was that God's Spirit would be there. What makes the temple the temple? God's presence. Remember, when it leaves and Ezekiel sees it, they're all going, hey, the temple, the temple, the temple. And Ezekiel goes, but God's not there. It's no longer the temple if God is not there. And that's what we're going to kind of be looking at tonight. Is heaven a location? Can heaven be moved? Right? Can heaven change locations? Okay, and that's what we're going to kind of look at tonight. This is an introduction into the heaven on earth typology in Scripture. There is much more we could talk about, especially if we did a deep dive into like Ezekiel, Isaiah, Zechariah, Revelation. We're not doing that tonight. Okay, that would take up probably the rest of our 13 weeks just doing that alone. Ezekiel, by the way, is a fantastic study in this. All right, and does anyone know the very last phrase of Ezekiel? It's after it's looked at the new Jerusalem, which is a new garden, which is a new kingdom. The very last phrase, the name of the city will be called The Lord is There. That's the last phrase. It's one of the most powerful endings to any book. The name of the city is The Lord is There. Okay? All right. The narrative of the Bible is that God has been trying to dwell among men, and in new creation that will be fully possible because of Jesus. That's the claim, okay? That's the truth claim. So let's look at some of our discussions. In the Bible, the word heaven is used in different ways depending on the context. A lot of times in the Bible, the heaven is just referring to what part of the world? The sky, where the birds fly. Okay? Or sometimes it's the stars. It's representative of a place where man cannot get to. A lot of times. And we're going to get there in a moment. But a lot of times it's just the sky. Like when God, in the beginning, Genesis 1:1, when God created the heavens and the earth, what heavens are we talking about? It's not where God is. Right? He's not creating his place of abode. We're talking about the earth and sky. Okay? And I'm not going to read all those passages, but obviously you guys are familiar with some of those things. But what I want to look at tonight is it can refer to what we just consider God's space. Where God is, where God dwells, where God is. This isn't just the spiritual realm where Satan is and where, demons are and angels. It's where the location of God. It's wherever he is. Now, that's a very tricky concept to pin down. Why?
Because you don't know where it's at.
Well, you don't know where it's at, but what is one of the characteristics of God? God is everywhere. And that's where our basic understanding of the nature of God fails us. Because if God is everywhere, then how can the Bible describe as God being somewhere and not somewhere? Right? How can he do that? If God is everywhere, how can he not be somewhere?
Well, do you think there's a difference between us being in God's presence and him being in our presence?
Think about that. I like that. I'm going to write that down. All right. God in man's presence versus man in God's presence.
Well, anybody that's a baptized believer has his presence for them.
Now, what's the difference between presence and perception? Meaning just because God is everywhere, like he can perceive everywhere, right? There's nothing on the world. When we talk about God as omniscient or omnipresent, what we're really describing is the fact that God, nowhere is hidden from God. Right? Nowhere is hidden from God. Okay? But does that mean his fully revealed, because once again, if we saw the fully revealed presence of God, what would that cause us to do? Die. All right, that's where this veil that we talk about, the separation, right, kind of comes in, right? So I'm kind of working this out as I'm going, but I think there's an instance of God's omnipresence in which it's more talking about there's no place hidden from God. There's no place he couldn't be. And there's no place he can't perceive all at the same time. Right? But the fact of the matter is there are places where God is in a much more quality sense, right? Where he's put more of himself somewhere that causes it to change the nature of the location where you're at. Think about Moses coming to the burning bush. What did the burning bush say to Moses? Take off your sandals, for this is now... Well, if God's everywhere, then every ground should be holy. So there's something about God appearing there and being there in a more qualitative sense in which it changed the nature of that place. It's like the Ark of the Covenant, right? You touch the Ark of the Covenant, you're not a priest, what happens to you? You die. That can be just a command, but it also has something to do, that's the place where God sits, right? The most holy place. All right, so I know, did the 5-minute bell already ring? Oh. Let's read a couple of these, and then we'll leave this for next week. Deuteronomy 26:15. One of the good things about these notes, guys, is go home and read them, write down notes, and come prepared next week to maybe discuss some things. That would help out the class go smoother if you have some kind of pre-awareness. So Deuteronomy 26:15 says, "Look down from your holy habitation from heaven, and bless your people Israel, and the ground that you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey." So there is a separation between where God is in heaven and the land in which they've been given. Look down on us from your... But if you've been reading the story of God, who's been in the presence of Israel the entire time they've been in this land? Who's led them to this land? God, by his presence. So there is a difference between his holy hill, right? His holy habitation, where God sits, his throne room, and where he places, we call them theophanies. Okay, a theophany is a place where God is among men on earth. So there's a difference there. Let's read Isaiah 66. Let's jump to Isaiah 66 real quick. What was the sin of Babel, by the way?
We were trying to build something to heaven.
Up to the, right? They wanted to sit where God sat. Okay? And so they wanted to build this tower so they could be among God, all right, in the heavens. All right, that's why they built it up, which is funny. You know, we talk about people like, well, heaven's got to be up, right? All right, let's think about an earth. What shape is the earth? So which way's up? Right? Up. Well, that's a jump. Up is depending on where you're sitting on the globe. So up could be this way. Up could be this way. Up could be this way. It's a concept, guys. It's not a north, south, east, west kind of thing. Okay? Hell is down in the ground somewhere. No, it's not. It's not in the center of the earth, right? The type thing. Okay? So someone read Isaiah 66, 1 and 2, and that's probably where we'll stop. All right, that's good right there. Heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool. Right? So there's a separation between where God is and where man dwells. Deuteronomy 26, right? And what we're trying to get back to is a place where they can be one again. All right?
Like that song, Together Again.
Together again. And ultimately, all views are trying to get with man and God together, right?